Donald Trump is really getting the attention he wants, and he says he's getting attention for the issue that voters care about. When you look at his poll numbers, it doesn't seem to be hurting him.
Well, the problem is Trump is right in identifying problems correctly, and they are problems that I would say a majority of Americans would agree are problems. The recent killing in San Francisco is an example of the tragedy of immigration reform and the need for change. The problem for Trump and the problem for Republicans is he talks about it in such a terrible way that people sort of tune it out. And then when substantive Republicans come on and want to talk about immigration, they have a tough time because people hear that all Mexicans are rapists and they associate that with the rest of the party. Now, that said, I think he's actually making some Republicans look more serious that would not have that contrast if he were not in the race. So this could benefit some of the second and third tier Republicans.
Ben, you were last week, I think, talking about how much you admired Mike Huckabee when it came to appointments and outreach to the African-American community when he was governor of Arkansas. But he did not take my bait when I asked him about Donald Trump.
I thought he did a good job today, though, speaking in a heartful way and in a caring way about immigrants. 99.9% of most populations are good people. If I got here on television and said, a white guy with a bad toupee killed somebody yesterday, therefore I'm mad at Donald Trump, people would say, that's bizarre. What does that have to do with anything? You cherry pick one person who killed somebody and then you malign 14 million people. That's not leadership, that's demagoguery. And I think that, it may turn out later on that Hillary Clinton is actually paying Donald Trump to do this because it makes all Republicans look terrible.
Well, you think that this is a leadership moment for the Republican candidates?
I think it's a leadership moment or a lack of leadership moment. I mean, we saw Jeb Bush there very squarely addressing this. Of course, he was asked by it. By reporters at a parade, but that's fine. He gave, I thought, a very, strong adult answer here. Marco Rubio has still not really addressed this, except in a short statement when asked by a reporter about this, a paper statement. So I would call that sort of a leadership with a small L moment. But I think that, Rick Perry has addressed this and others. But if the Republican Party is going to grow its sort of outreach to Hispanic voters, I mean, they have to sort of stop this kind of discussion. People remember 27%. That's the percentage of the Hispanic vote that Mitt Romney won in 2012. George W. Bush, 40% in 2004. There's no path to the White House for Republicans if they don't expand that 27%. And I think all this language is very difficult.
One of the things that was interesting, the point that Mike Huckabee made, which is a lot of Latinos, or a lot of immigrants, he said, but it certainly applies to Latino immigrants, are socially very conservative. Church-based, anti-same-sex marriage, anti-abortion, and yet they vote Democratic for a number of reasons. One of the reasons is if you talk to Latino activists and Republican Latino activists, they hear too often from Republicans a message of "we don't want you." That's what Jeb Bush and others are trying to change.
Right, and that's what Donald Trump's comments are doing. I mean, they're inflammatory. You've seen a Republican Party, they've invested millions in trying to do outreach to minorities, to Latino voters. There's a recognition, particularly after 2012, that you can't win a national election without reaching out to these groups. And Donald Trump is complicating that for them and creating some heartburn within the party, which is also why you've seen him isolated. I mean, most of the Republican candidates have distanced themselves from him, and that's the reason.